Okay, guys, welcome to our WT session. Now let's go for revision. Third unit servlets topic revision, which is very important even during your examination. Okay, let's see first of all what is a servlet. Generally, what is a servlet? Servlet is a program which will be executed on the server side. Yes or no? Is a program which is used for executing it on the server side, and once it starts its execution there, it will create a servlet program. So when the client sends the request to the server, this server will create a request based on the client's request. Based on the client's request, it will create a servlet program, and this servlet program will execute. So what will happen once the servlet program executes, then it will send that servlet program to the servlet, and from servlet it will go to the client. This is how client server communication will be going on within a network. So what will happen? First of all, if you look at the life cycle of a servlet, it is having various methods, something like this: init, service, and destroy. These are the main methods which. Yes, are you able to view the screen? Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
good. Somehow something has gone wrong. Okay, fine, whatever. We are able to connect again. So these are the methods through which a servlet undergoes. That is init and service. From init method, it moves to service method and then destroys. So what happens in these three different methods? That is what we should see. When you consider init method, init is nothing but initializing the servlet. So that means you are starting. The servlet is starting here. The servlet is starting here. In your init method, the servlet starts. That means the servlet program starts. Okay. When the servlet program starts, next, so this init method will be called only once. That means during the start of a servlet, this init method is called. After that, the servlet goes to the service method. This is the major operation, major method which should actually execute in order to execute a servlet program. So what happens in this servlet is, service method is, whichever request the client sends, the response with respect to the request of client will be handled in the service method. Is this clear? So what happens here is, service method handles multiple client requests and sends their responses, multiple responses. If suppose, let us suppose there is some request, I asked for certain request on something called as cookie, let us suppose. Okay, when I asked some data related to cookie, it has to reach to the server. The server will initiate a servlet program by using these methods. When it after initiating, it has to service. So it will be searching for the data related to cookie there. That is nothing but handling the request given by the client. And this same service method is responsible for sending the response to the servlet, to the client from the servlet. So what happens is, the service method has to be handled. Once the service method is handled, which actually handles multiple client requests, it's not only one request, multiple requests, and then that particular program gets destroyed. That means the request called, or the request on cookie is started, is serviced, nothing but served, and then that particular program will get destroyed. So what that means, you are ending the servlet program here. So what is happening here? It will be called, the init method will be called only once. Similarly, the destroy method, that means ending of the servlet also will be done only once. But if it is a service method, it will undergo, or it will be executed any number of times, as many number of times as the client gives a request. Suppose I am a client, I am giving the request. When I am giving the request, first of all, I'll be asking the data on cookie. Immediately, let me suppose I'm asking some data regarding session. All those things will be handled because the same user is sending various requests. Those are all done in the service method. Multiple number of requests will be handled. Of course, internally from the same user, if it is able to handle multiple requests, that is being done by another program called as a cookie, which we have seen in our previous sessions. Okay, so that is what happens in the service method. So these are the basic life cycle methods of a servlet. That means this is the life cycle of a servlet program. That means first of all it will be born, it will perform various operations, and then it will get destroyed. That means it is ending its life. That is what is called as a life cycle methods of a servlet. Okay, so how it happens is, this is how it happens. First of all, it will start, that means the client is giving the request, loading and instantiating the servlet program, and then it will start. It's nothing but you are using an init method.
Based on the source.
You are using an init method here. When you use an init method, the servlet program is initialized. That means you are saying that now it is ready for service. Okay, once it is ready for service, it will create a service method. Using this service method, the request will be handled. Okay, if suppose if it is unable to handle the request, then which is in terms of a thread, which is a small program. Okay, then again it will start initializing until the service method is able to handle the request. Once it is done, it will end the servlet. That means it will be calling a destroy method. As such, it is ending of the life cycle of a servlet. Is this clear? So this is what will happen within a servlet. This is how the flowchart works within a servlet when a servlet is getting executed. So let us see the syntax and the initialization of all the methods within a servlet. So if you consider servlet, how to write the code, that is what we should see. What to write the code in between these methods. Please mute Shabad Meghana. Okay, what is to be written in the code? That is, if it is init method, it will be called only once. Okay, so how this is the code? Please look at the code, understand the code. What is happening there? There you are saying it's let us suppose, and always one thing is our servlet program should implement servlet interface. Servlet interface, which is already available in the library. So let us suppose we are now writing a code and the name of our class is my servlet. Obviously, we'll be writing this using what do we call? Using the same Java program. Okay, object oriented. That is why we are creating it as a class, and this will be implementing an interface called servlet. And within this servlet, when you started writing this, you are using init method, because you started, you are instantiating the servlet. So you'll be using init method. When you are using init method, servlet config is a class for which you created an object within the init method. It is used as a parameter, and this is the code. Just it will say throws if there are any exceptions, then it will say throws a servlet exception, and some code which is related to that. Okay, after that, next let us see about, so we have seen about init method. Now are you able to understand what I am doing? Next it is a service method. Next it is a service method. Service method, again my class, my servlet, which implements servlet interface. In the service method, you'll be having two parameters. One is servlet request and the other one is servlet response, because service method has to handle all the requests and has to give all the responses. That is what we have seen here. Service method is handling multiple client requests and sends response. As a result, both the requests and responses are associated with the service method, and hence they are taken as parameters for the service method. Similarly, we are using in order to for the sake of exception handling, we are throwing the servlet exception and IO exception, whatever it is. Okay, please let me take a picture of this because I have to show this. That is 31 students. 1 second, guys. Thank you. And next, let me share one more screen regarding servlet. How to deploy. These are the 3 methods which we will be using for a servlet program. Now, how to deploy that particular servlet, because servlet should be, wow, Amrit Raj. Amrit Raj has joined after many days to the class.
Ma'am, 31 part is 32, ma'am. Koncham screen అయిపోతుంది ఒకేసారి.
Yeah, I took the picture, no issues. Okay, fine.
Labs, 32 participants.
Okay, yeah. So, how do you create? So, see what happens is, in order to execute the servlet, it has to be deployed in the server. That is what that particular program must be deployed. Because unless it is getting deployed, you can't get the output or response from the server. That is what happens. So what you should do is you should deploy this particular servlet program into the server. But we are working in our client machines, right? In our own machines. We don't have a server here. So in order to make server work, we are using servlet program. That is fine. But that should be made deployed into the server. So within the client machine itself, we should have server also. In order to put this particular servlet program into server, you can't simply say to go to server or such things, right? So what you should do is you will be having certain steps to deploy that particular servlet in the server, so that you will be getting requests from the server based on the client request. Because we are writing the code. We are not just giving the request here. We are writing the code in such a way that the request, whichever is given by the client, should be obtained, should get the response from the server. So that this entire thing, these 3 statements must be written in terms of code. How that is done? Which by using these following steps. The process of putting the servlet program into this server is said to be deployment. Now it has to follow these various steps. So what you should do is, first of all, you should create a root directory structure, then create the servlet program, compile the servlet, as well create the deployment descriptor. This is the main thing which has to be used. This deployment descriptor. Deployment descriptor is nothing but an XML file. We name that as an web.xml. Now start the server and deploy the project there, such that whichever request you give, that will be given in terms of a response. The first step is to create a directory structure. So how do you create a directory structure? So when you basically you will be doing this servlet program in Java Eclipse. Okay, so there you are having, if you remember, when your Java lab session, there you are having something called as create project and all. Okay, so what happens there is, you will be creating a project. In that project, you'll have to create this root directory structure. This is how it appears. In that, you will be having web app. There is something called, when you say create a new project, you'll be having something called as web app. Okay, This web app is nothing but which is responsible for creating all our web.xml files. So this web app is to be the this is a web application. So this is used to handle web applications because we are dealing with servlets. The servlets are nothing but the programs in the server. So what we do is we have to create a root directory structure. The root directory structure, the root of this particular directory structure is web app. Okay, 33 web app. This web app is having a hierarchy. In that you'll have web-inf. Web-inf is again having class. Web-inf is actually having classes and library. These classes is used to store the class files because we'll be writing the code in Java and we will try to compile it. When we compile, we'll be getting the class file. That class files are all stored in classes. We should store those class files. And then library. Library is generally available in web-inf and web.xml file. We should create the web.xml file. So when you create a root directory structure, web application is used to store all the class files and our web.xml file, which is said to be a descriptor, deployment descriptor. Okay, this file as well as our class files are kept in this. So this is the structure where you should keep what. If you have class files, those must be kept under web-inf in classes. If you have web.xml, obviously you'll have class files and web.xml file. So when you have web.xml file, that must be placed in web-inf. Similarly, if you have some other static resources or any HTML files which are used for creating static web pages, all those will be kept in the web app root directory. This is said to be a context root. Is this clear? So what will happen next? Now you need to create a servlet. That means you are writing a program now, servlet program. How is there are three ways to do that. One is by implementing the servlet class. That is why when you look at the init method there, when you are trying to use the init method, you are writing a my servlet program, which is nothing but we named it as my servlet, and we are implementing the servlet interface there. So one way to create servlet is to implement servlet interface or by extending generic servlet class or by extending HTTP servlet class. We can do this by we can create a servlet using any of these things, but we can't simply say class my servlet. Okay, so this is how it appears. So what are the things you should import in order to do such things are like extending HTTP servlet, extending generic servlet class, or implementing servlet class is servlet interface is by doing this, by importing from the library. How java x.servlet.http. Why HTTP did we use here? Because we are extending HTTP servlet. In order to be more specific, we will be using .http.star. But you can do it simply java x.servlet.star also. But if you simply do this, if the Java version is not updated one, then in that case, again it will ask for importing this file also. That is why let us go for importing this. If it is this, if it is only this, that is import java x.servlet.star. If it is the only import statement, we may get problems sometimes. Okay, so we are using a class now which is extending HTTP servlet. Okay, and whenever you use HTTP servlet, we'll be using do get do post methods, which will take HTTP servlet request and HTTP servlet response. Because when you consider your service method, the service method will take parameters as request and response. Yes or no? Because the service method of a servlet is used to serve the request given by the client and give the response. That is why we are taking those things as parameters there. What we are doing is we are giving the same request and response as an object to the do get as parameters to the do get method. Okay. Now you'll need to compile the servlet. When you are compiling the servlet, there is actually too much of scenario here to go on. For compiling the servlet, jar files are required. That is what is very important in this particular servlet concepts. Jar file is required. Those must be loaded because we are working with the servers. We are working with the servers and different servers will provide different jar files. So if you are using a server like any of this, Apache Tomcat, WebLogic, Glassfish, JAWS, each of this server will have a separate jar file. Okay, so what is this jar file? Is nothing but it is Java archive files. It will have files related to all files related to the corresponding server there. So see, we are saying that our client machine is only having the our local machine is itself having the client machine is itself the same client machine as well as the server machine, right? So it is, as it is handling both of these things, we should make all these things get downloaded into our local machine. Okay, so for that purpose, in order to compile a servlet which actually is available in the server side, and servers are of these types, as a result you need to have a jar file. So if at all, if you consider, if you are downloading Apache, you need not go for all of this. You need not go for all of this. Okay, any of these servers is okay. So suppose if you are doing it with Apache Tomcat, that means you downloaded your Apache Tomcat, then you will be using or you will be compiling the servlet in servlet API.jar. This is what happens. Okay. Next we need to create one more thing along with the servlet, that is deployment descriptor, right? Deployment descriptor is nothing but web.xml file. Where do you have this web.xml? If you remember your servlet root directory structure, you have web.xml there in the web application. Okay, so you should create this web.xml. Why this is used? Because this is used to get the information about the servlet. This is used to invoke or get the information about the servlet. So the deployment descriptor is an XML file. That is what it is, a web.xml file, because from which web container gets the information about the servlet. Okay, so how does it execute? If you consider your web.xml file, it will be like this. What will you do in web.xml is the question. In web.xml, you will be providing the servlet name whichever you used and the servlet mapping to where it exists. Okay, for example, if you are, so this is how the web.xml looks like. That is, you'll have, this is how it should be written, web.xml file within the web app, web application. You are having a servlet. It has its name, and when you execute your servlet program, which is a Java program, it will be getting a servlet class, which also will be in the same name as that of the servlet. So it is demo servlet. And at the same time, the servlet mapping is also available. So what is available in servlet mapping is the same servlet name as well as the URL pattern. URL pattern is nothing but the path. Is nothing but the path. So one thing which I can tell you is URL pattern you can give anything. Servlet name also you can give anything, but the servlet class should be as the same name as your Java program. Okay, this is how the web.xml file. So what you should do now, you should create this deployment descriptor web.xml file. So what and all did we do now? In order to execute a servlet program, in order to execute, it should be compiled. In order to compile, you should have a proper server downloaded in your system, so that it will be compiled in a jar file, in its corresponding jar file. You should import some of the files so that you can implement, or your servlet program can be implemented or extended. That means it uses inheritance property. It uses inheritance property. Okay. So any of these things can be done. For this thing, you should import various things. You should compile the servlet based on the server, and then you should write a web.xml file with the servlet name and with knowing the details of servlet as well as its URL pattern. Okay, so what and all, see, if you look at the description of all the things, servlet name is a sub-element which represents the name of the servlet. Servlet class is the code which is the class file which is obtained by executing the servlet program. And servlet mapping, it is used to map the servlet, and URL pattern, this pattern is used at client side to invoke the servlet. That is why you will be using the path there, because you need to map at the client side, because to which client it is giving, it should know, yes or no. To, because this client can give two requests, multiple requests. I will ask, I being a client will ask, or I'll request for some topic called as cookie, some topic called as session, and some topic called as database. So I am a single client giving various requests. These various requests will be handled by various servlet programs. So when I ask data about cookie, I should get response in terms of cookie, but not the database. When I ask about session, I should get response in terms of session only, but not something related to client, cookie or database. So for whichever query you are giving which answer is dependent upon this URL pattern. So this is used to invoke the servlet as well as to give the response to the servlet. Is this clear? And next, this is how you will be doing or deploying the project. When you are deploying the project into the server, we should follow that export var file, go to our project, right click, and these are the various steps. Run a server and type. See, these are various things which you should do on your screen while deploying a servlet. Deploying a servlet in the server. So these are all the things which happens when a servlet program is executed. If the main problem with servlet is because we are using both the server and client in our local machine itself, we need to deploy. That is why, though it's a Java program, it is not as simple as a normal Java program. Rather, it is appeared in terms of Java project. That is one thing. And what are all various things is, you should import various classes. You should be able to create web.xml file. You should be able to deploy it in the server. For that purpose, you should download. You should know what to download, which server to download, and deploy in the respective jar file. For that, you need to use certain commands and where to store what. See, if you have class files, you can't simply store it somewhere in web app. You should go to classes and then store them. So what you should know here, we will have certain directory structure wherein certain things are to be stored. This thing you should know for sure. So all these things you should put in mind while working with servlets. Okay. Once if we go with the deployment, it will be very easy. But you should get acquainted to it. In order to make the things easier and faster, you should work on it many times. So this is a procedure how you will do, and for it, you can't just simply write just like that. That is a main problem with the servlet, because we are dealing with server, which is something like at the top, and that top we are bringing into our system. That is the problem. So you have to follow this procedure. There is no other option other than following the procedure. But we should see how to follow the procedure, and these are the various steps for following such procedure. Among those, one thing, this procedure is nothing but called as servlet deployment. So simply knowing about the servlet is nothing but it will follow a certain life cycle. Like it will have 3 methods: init, service, destroy. Okay, and what and all happens in these 3 methods, that theoretically we can understand. But when you try to work on servlet, these are all various things to be kept in mind. Is that clear? So this is from your third unit, the second part. and we have seen only one topic, that is servlet topic. For only servlet topic, and this is all we can do with the we should do with servlet, not we can do, we should do with servlets. Unless you follow all these things, you don't have any other alternative. For sure you should follow all these things in order to work on a servlet program. So many things should be downloaded into our systems, and if you look at our lab sessions, you'll be using Ubuntu sessions, so you'll have to work with certain commands. You should know whatever, you should know all those things and work. That is a thing here with servlet. Okay, fine. Thank you.